They say the most dangerous place in the galaxy isn't the front line of a war zone, it's the negotiation table. But for Caleb Vance, a guy who just wanted to fix air filters and be left alone, the danger didn't come from a treaty. It came crashing through his ceiling in the middle of the night. She was the daughter of an enemy emperor. He was a glorified janitor. And when she looked him in the eye, terrified and cornered, and whispered a secret that would change the fate of two civilizations, Caleb knew his quiet life was over. How does a man with a wrench save a princess who can kill with her mind? You're about to find out. But before we dive into this high-stakes tale of galactic espionage and forbidden alliances, do me a massive favor. If you love sci-fi stories where the underdog takes on the empire, hit that like button. It really helps the algorithm find us. Make sure you're subscribed and have that notification bell turned on so you never miss a journey into the unknown. Ready? Let's get into the story. The Silent Vigil wasn't just a space station. It was a powder keg waiting for a match. Floating in the neutral zone between the Terran Coalition and the Xylosian Empire, the station was massive, a gleaming city of steel and glass designed to impress. Up on the promenade decks, the air smelled like synthetic lavender and expensive wine. That's where the diplomats were. That's where the cameras were. That's where they were signing the Century Treaty to end 50 years of brutal warfare. But Caleb Vance didn't live on the promenade. He lived in the guts. Caleb was a level 4 environmental technician. In plain English, he was the guy who crawled into the vents when the toilets backed up or the oxygen scrubbers clogged with space dust. He liked the guts. It was loud, it smelled like ozone and grease, but it was honest. The machines didn't lie to you. Unlike the politicians upstairs. It was 0300 hours ship time. Caleb was in his quarters, a closet-sized room tucked behind the main reactor shielding. It was the only place on the ship where the hum of the engines drowned out the noise of the thousands of delegates partying above. He was just settling in, a mug of lukewarm recaf in his hand, trying to read a vintage paperback, when the ship shuddered. It wasn't the gentle vibration of the thrusters. It was a sharp, violent thud that vibrated through the floor plating. Then the alarm screamed. Red alert. Hull breach in Sector 4. Sector 4? That was the diplomatic spire. That was 10 decks up. Caleb sighed, rubbing his temples. Great, he muttered to himself. Probably some ambassador's kid set off a firework. I'm not cleaning that up. He reached for his comms unit to check the duty roster, but before his fingers touched the screen, his ceiling exploded. There was a screech of tearing metal, a shower of sparks, and a heavy clang as a ventilation grate, and something else, slammed onto his floor. Dust and smoke filled the tiny room. Caleb coughed, waving his hand, his other hand instinctively grabbing the heavy wrench he kept on his nightstand. Who's there? He barked, adrenaline spiking. This is a restricted maintenance zone. The dust settled slowly. In the middle of his floor, amidst a pile of bent aluminum and insulation foam, lay a figure. It wasn't a maintenance drone. It was a woman. Or, at least, humanoid. She was tall, her skin a pale, iridescent violet that shimmered in the low light of his emergency LEDs. She was wearing the ceremonial armor of the Xylosian High Command, sleek, obsidian plating etched with glowing silver runes. But the armor was shattered. Smoke curled from a nasty scorch mark on her shoulder pauldron. She groaned, rolling onto her back. Her helmet had been knocked loose, revealing hair the color of starlight, white with shifting streaks of blue. Her eyes snapped open. They weren't human eyes. They were solid gold, with no pupil, burning with a terrifying intensity. Caleb froze. He knew that face. Everyone on the ship knew that face. It was plastered on every view screen from here to Earth. Princess Vespera. The first daughter of the Xylosian Empire. The woman whose signature was supposed to end the war. And she was bleeding on his rug. Caleb took a step back, raising the wrench. Your Highness? He stammered, the absurdity of the situation making his voice crack. Vespera scrambled backward, pressing herself against his locker. She looked like a cornered tiger, hurt but lethal. She reached for her hip, but her energy blade was gone. She hissed, a sound like steam escaping a pipe. Stay back, human. Her voice was melodic but edged with pain. I will not be taken hostage. Hostage? Caleb lowered the wrench slightly. Lady, you fell through my roof. I'm just trying to figure out why my quarters suddenly have a skylight. The alarms outside grew louder. Heavy boots thundered down the corridor past Caleb's door. Security teams. Vespera's golden eyes widened in genuine panic. She looked at the door, then at Caleb. The imperious royalty vanished, replaced by desperate survival instinct. They are coming, she whispered. Yeah, security, Caleb said. They'll help you. You're safe here. No. She lunged forward, ignoring her injuries, and grabbed Caleb by the collar of his grease-stained jumpsuit. She was surprisingly strong. She slammed him against the door, her face inches from his. Not security. Assassins. If you open that door, I am dead. And so are you for seeing me. Caleb stared at her. He saw the fear in those alien eyes. It wasn't the fear of a prisoner, it was the fear of a victim. Someone pounded on the door. Maintenance. Open up. We're doing a sector sweep for debris. Caleb felt Vespera tense. She looked at him, her mind racing. She needed to ensure he didn't open that door. She needed to shock him into compliance. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a sultry, dangerous whisper that sent a shiver down Caleb's spine. She pressed her body against his, the cold, broken armor digging into his chest. Human, she breathed, her golden eyes locking onto his. My armor is damaged. The seals are broken. I have nothing on beneath this plating. If you open that door, they will see everything. Is that what you want? It was a bluff. A bizarre, desperate alien bluff to distract him with scandal rather than politics. But in that split second, Caleb realized two things. One, she was terrified. And two, the security voice outside didn't sound like the standard station guard. It sounded like the heavy mercenaries employed by the diplomatic escorts. Caleb looked at the door, then back at the alien princess trembling in his arms. He made a choice that defied all logic and training. Go away. Caleb shouted through the door, his voice gruff. I'm busy. Hazardous leak. Pants are down. Come back in 10. There was a pause outside. Then a grunt. Check the next room. Move. The footsteps faded. Caleb slumped against the door, exhaling a breath he didn't know he was holding. Vespera released him instantly, sliding down to the floor, clutching her wounded shoulder. You. She gasped, the golden light in her eyes dimming as exhaustion took over. You lied for me. Yeah, well, Caleb muttered, locking the heavy mag bolts on the door. I've always had a problem with authority. Now start talking, princess, before I regret this. Vespera didn't speak immediately. She simply stared at the human, analyzing him. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a diplomat. He was clutter. A man of tools and dust. But he had just saved the heir to the Xylosian throne. The explosion, she finally said, her voice tight with pain. It wasn't an accident. It was a breach charge on my suite. My own guards, they locked the doors from the outside. I barely made it into the ventilation shaft before the room was incinerated. Caleb pulled a first aid kit from under his bunk. It was standard-issue Terran medical gear, bandages, biofoam, and painkillers strong enough to knock out a mule. Your own guards? But the Xylosians are pushing for this peace treaty harder than we are. Not all of us, Vespera hissed as Caleb sprayed biofoam on the burn on her shoulder. She flinched, her skin rippling, but she didn't cry out. There is a faction. The Pure Bloods. They believe peace with humanity is a contagion. They want the war to continue until one of us is extinct. And killing you starts the war again, Caleb finished. He capped the spray. So, who can we trust? The station commander? The ambassador? Vespera laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. The assassin who planted the charge. I saw his face before I ran. He wasn't Xylosian. He was human. Wearing the uniform of your diplomatic corps. Caleb froze. Wait. You're saying a human tried to kill you, aided by your own guards? A conspiracy, Vespera nodded. Spanning both our species. If I go to the bridge, I die. If I contact my fleet, I die. I am trapped in a metal box floating in the void, and everyone with a gun wants me erased. Caleb stood up and paced the small room. This was way above his pay grade. He fixed toilets. He calibrated humidity sensors. He didn't do galactic conspiracies. But looking at Vespera, proud, terrified, and utterly alone, he felt a pang of sympathy. He knew what it was like to be a cog in a machine that didn't care if you broke. Okay, Caleb said, turning to her. We can't stay here. If they're sweeping the decks, they'll come back with a master key. We need to move. Move where? Vespera asked, struggling to her feet. The corridors are monitored. The elevators are locked down. Caleb grinned, grabbing his utility belt and a portable datapad. Princess, you walk the corridors. I walk the ship. We're going into the veins. For the next 6 hours, Caleb Vance took the Princess of the Xylosian Empire on a tour of the silent vigil that no dignitary had ever seen. They crawled through service tunnels that smelled of recycled air and coolant. They climbed down ladder shafts that stretched for miles into the dark belly of the station. Caleb moved with the fluid grace of a man who knew every rivet and weld. Vespera, despite her injuries and bulky armor, kept up. As they moved, the barrier between them began to chip away. "Why do you do this?" Vespera asked as they rested in a water reclamation chamber, the sound of rushing water drowning out any surveillance bugs. "You are a servant class. Yet you know more about this station than the captain." "I'm not a servant," Caleb corrected, checking a diagnostic panel. "I'm a technician. The captain knows how to fly the ship. I know how to keep it from exploding. There's a difference." He looked at her. "And why are you trusting a servant?" Vespera looked at the rushing water. "Because the masters tried to incinerate me. Perhaps I have misjudged the value of those who work in the dark." It was a small moment, but it shifted everything. They weren't enemies anymore. They were partners. Their destination was the secondary server farm, a cold storage data hub located near the engine core. Caleb knew that if there was a conspiracy, the communication logs would be there. The diplomats scrubbed the main servers, but nobody bothered with the backups in the engineering archive. They thought nobody looked there. They were wrong. "We need evidence," Caleb said as they reached the heavy blast door of the server room. "If we can prove your guards coordinated with our diplomats, we can broadcast it. But we have to get inside." The door was locked with a biometric scanner. "Human DNA only. High-level clearance." "I can't open this," Caleb admitted. "I'm level 4. This is level 1 clearance." Vespera stepped forward. She placed her hand over the scanner. "My armor," she said. "It has a kinetic override interface. It can persuade the lock." "You mean hack it?" "I mean brute force it with localized gravity distortion," she corrected smugly. Sparks flew as her gauntlet glowed purple. The heavy steel door groaned, warping inward before the lock mechanism shattered. "Subtle," Caleb deadpanned. "Effective," she countered. They slipped inside. The room was a forest of blinking blue lights and humming servers. Caleb plugged his datapad into a terminal, his fingers flying across the keys. "I'm searching for encrypted transmission spikes at the time of the explosion," Caleb muttered. Come on. Vespera stood guard at the door, her senses attuned to the vibrations of the deck. "Hurry, Caleb. I feel a disturbance." "Got it?" Caleb whispered. He pulled up a holographic file. It was a video log. The image flickered to life. It showed a dimly lit office. 2 figures stood there. One was Director Silas, the head of the human negotiation team. A man Caleb had seen on TV giving speeches about everlasting friendship. The other figure was a massive Xylosian. He wore the scars of 1,000 battles and a red cape made of synthetic beast fur. Vespera gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "General Krog. My father's war master." In the video, Director Silas poured a drink. "The explosion will take out the princess at 0300, Silas said calmly. "The blame will fall on Xylosian radicals. The coalition will have no choice but to retaliate. And I will lead the counterstrike," General Krog growled, his voice deep and distorted. "We will crush the weaklings in the Senate. The war will reignite, and this time, we will not stop until Earth is glass. And the profits from the weapon contracts will be split 50-50. Silas clinked his glass against the alien's armor. "To war. To war." Caleb downloaded the file, his hands shaking. "It's not just a coup," he whispered. "It's a business deal. They're selling out both our species for credits and power." Suddenly, the lights in the server room turned red. The door they had forced open slammed shut, magnetically sealing them in. A voice boomed over the intercom. It was Director Silas. "Mr. Vance. I must say I'm impressed. Most janitors just steal copper wire. You stole state secrets." Caleb looked at Vespera. She wasn't looking at the intercom. She was looking at the ventilation grate in the corner. "They tracked the login," Caleb realized. "We're trapped." "General Krog is very eager to finish what he started," Silas continued. "Security teams are cutting through the door now. Make it easy on yourselves. Surrender and I promise, it will be quick." Vespera's eyes began to glow again, brighter this time. The air around her crackled with static electricity. "Caleb," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "Do you trust me?" "I'm trapped in a box with an alien princess while my boss tries to murder me," Caleb replied, pulling his wrench. "I'm all out of other options." "Then hold your breath." The blast door began to glow orange as a plasma cutter sliced through it from the outside. Sparks rained down like molten rain. "What do you mean, hold my breath?" Caleb yelled over the noise. "My people, we are not just warriors, Vespera said, stepping into the center of the room. She closed her eyes, and the purple runes on her broken armor flared to life, pulsing in sync with her heartbeat. We are kinetic psychics. But I am wounded. I cannot fight them all. I can only create a path. The door blew inward. Smoke billowed in. Through the haze, armored figures stormed the room, human mercenaries and Xylosian elite shock troopers fighting side by side. A perversion of the unity the treaty was supposed to bring. Leading them was a tall, sleek Xylosian holding a shimmering energy spear. Commander Kale. Vespera's personal bodyguard. The man sworn to die for her. Traitor. Vespera screamed, the sound hitting Caleb like a physical blow. Kale stepped forward, his face impassive. I serve the Empire, Princess. And the Empire needs strong blood, not peace lovers. Surrender. Get down? Vespera shouted at Caleb. She threw her hands forward. A shockwave of pure kinetic energy erupted from her body. It wasn't magic, it was physics manipulated by biology. The wave hit the soldiers like a freight train. The heavy servers were ripped from their bolts and hurled across the room. The mercenaries were tossed into the walls like ragdolls. The entire room buckled. Pipes burst, spraying freezing coolant everywhere. Caleb, huddled behind a mainframe, watched in awe. She was a weapon of mass destruction. But the effort cost her. As the wave dissipated, Vespera collapsed to her knees, coughing up violet blood. Using that much power while injured was killing her. Commander Kale was the only one left standing. He had anchored himself with his spear. He walked through the wreckage toward the fallen princess. Pathetic, Kale sneered, raising the spear. Caleb didn't think. He acted. He wasn't a soldier. He didn't have a gun. But he was an environmental tech, and he knew exactly which pipe had just burst. He grabbed a loose power cable from the severed server rack, 400 volts of live current, and jammed it into the puddle of coolant flooding the floor around Kale's feet. Zotzik. The liquid conducted the charge instantly. Kale convulsed, his armor seizing up as the electricity fried his suit's servos. He toppled over, paralyzed, his spear clattering to the deck. Caleb dropped the cable, panting. Never mess with the electrician. He ran to Vespera. She was barely conscious. The hallway outside was filling with more troops. They had bought seconds, not minutes. We can't fight them, Vespera whispered, clutching Caleb's arm. There are too many. They will hunt us until we are dead. Caleb looked at the datapad in his pocket. He had the truth. But he couldn't broadcast it from here. The bridge had locked down all external comms. We need to get off the ship, Caleb said. But the hangars are locked down. There is another way, Vespera murmured. Her eyes drifted to a schematic on the wall, the med bay. But it requires a lie. What lie? We have to give them what they want, she said, her voice trembling. They want a dead princess. So, let's give them one. Caleb realized what she meant. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was perfect. They dragged themselves into the adjacent medical storage bay. Caleb barricaded the door. Inside there were rows of stasis pods, coffin-like tubes used for transporting critically injured patients. The neural dampener, Vespera instructed, pointing to the control panel of a pod. If you set it to 99%, it suppresses all life signs. Heartbeat, brainwaves, everything stops. To any sensor, I will appear as a corpse. And if I set it to 100%? Caleb asked, his fingers hovering over the dial. Then I never wake up, she said grimly. Great margins, Caleb muttered. And what do I do with your corpse? Jettison the pod, she said. Target the nearest gravity well. A moon. An asteroid. My suit has a transponder. Once I am out of range of the station's jammers, the pod will reboot. If you programmed it right. The pounding on the door returned. They were cutting through again. Caleb, Vespera said, stepping into the pod. The glass lid hissed shut. She looked at him through the transparency, her golden eyes soft. You are the only human who has ever seen me. Not the title. Me. Don't get mushy on me, princess, Caleb said, his voice thick with emotion. Just don't die. He typed in the sequence. Dampening, 99%. Inside the pod, Vespera's eyes closed. Her chest stopped moving. The monitor flatlined. Subject deceased. Caleb's heart hammered. He slammed his hand on the emergency eject button. The floor beneath the pod opened. With a whoosh of escaping air, the pod was sucked out into the cold vacuum of space, tumbling away from the station like a piece of trash. The door behind Caleb burst open. Silas's men stormed in, guns raised. Caleb raised his hands, holding the empty datapad, He had hidden the real chip in his boot. "She's gone," Caleb yelled, faking panic. "She tried to escape in a faulty pod. The life support failed. Look at the readings." He pointed to the screen. "Subject deceased." The lead mercenary checked the sensors. "Confirmed. Pod ejected. No life signs. The target is terminated." Director Silas walked in looking at the screen. He smiled, a cold, reptilian smile. "Well done, gentlemen. The war is back on. Take Mr. Vance to the brig. We'll execute him in the morning for aiding a fugitive." Caleb let them drag him away. He didn't fight. He just watched the view screen, watching that tiny speck of a pod drift into the dark. "Wake up," he prayed. "Please just wake up." The brig on the silent vigil was less of a jail and more of a sensory deprivation tank. Dark, silent, and cold. Caleb sat on the metal bench, counting the seconds. He estimated Vespera's pod would reach the gravity well of the nearby moon, Charon 4, in 4 hours. If she woke up, she had the transponder. She didn't. Well, Caleb was dead anyway. He had the data chip hidden in his boot heel. But a chip was useless without a transmitter. Suddenly the lights in the cell flickered. The electronic lock on his door clicked green and slid open. Caleb stood up, confused. "Hello?" A robotic voice echoed from his comms unit, but it wasn't the ship's AI. It sounded annoyed. "Mr. Vance. I am ARIA, the automated repair and intelligence algorithm for Sector 4 maintenance. You have left 3 work orders pending in the guts. I cannot complete them without your authorization." Caleb grinned. He had programmed Arya years ago to be obsessive about paperwork. He had forgotten he gave her backdoor access to the security grid to expedite his movement. "Arya," Caleb whispered. "Forget the work orders. Can you access the main broadcast array?" "Negative. The bridge has locked it out. However, I detect an unauthorized signal broadcasting from the surface of Charon 4. It is using Xylosian encryption." Caleb's heart leaped. She was alive. "Arya, I need a ship. Something fast. Something off the books. There is a decommissioned waste hauler in Docking Bay 9. The Rusty Bucket. It is suboptimal." "It's perfect." Caleb sprinted through the empty corridors. The station was in chaos. The news of the princess's death had leaked, and the Xylosian fleet was already powering up weapons. General Krog was preparing to fire. Caleb reached Docking Bay 9. The ship, rechristened the Rogue Echo in faded paint, was a flying brick. But it had engines. He fired it up, blasting out of the hangar bay before flight control could even ask for his ID. He pushed the engines to 120%, the old metal groaning as he sped toward the moon. Come on, Caleb urged the throttle. He landed the ship in a crater of gray dust. There, half buried in regolith, was the pod. The lid was open. Vespera was sitting on a rock nearby, shivering, hugging her knees. She looked up as Caleb ran down the ramp. She looked terrible, pale, weak, shaking from the aftereffects of the stasis. But alive. He didn't say a word. He just wrapped his jacket around her shoulders. "You came?" she chattered. "I had a pending work order," he joked weakly. "Let's go. We have a war to stop." They were back in orbit within minutes. But now they had a problem. The Xylosian fleet and the human fleet were facing off. Missiles were armed. "We need to broadcast the video," Caleb said, plugging the chip into the Rogue Echo's comm system. "But this ship's transmitter is too weak. It won't reach the fleets through the jamming." Vespera looked at the console. She placed her hand on the dashboard. Her eyes glowed, but faintly. "My armor is gone. My energy is low. But I can act as an amplifier. I can channel your ship's reactor output directly into the antenna." "That could fry your brain," Caleb warned. "And if we don't, billions die," she countered. "Do it, Caleb." Caleb initiated the upload. Connecting to the reactor. "Now." Vespera screamed as the energy surged through her. The ship vibrated violently. Purple lightning arced from her hands into the console. On the bridge of the silent vigil, Director Silas was giving the order to fire. On the bridge of the Xylosian flagship, General Krog was laughing. Suddenly, every screen in the sector went black. Then the video played. "The explosion will take out the princess. The profits will be split 50-50. The voice of Director Silas echoed across 1,000 ships. The image of General Krog shaking hands with the human traitor played on loop. The firing stopped. Silence fell over the battlefield. Then chaos. On the Xylosian flagship, Krog's own officers turned on him. On the silent vigil, the legitimate security forces arrested Silas on the spot. The war ended before it began. On the Rogue Echo the sparks died down. Vespera slumped into the co-pilot's chair, breathing heavily. Did it work? She whispered. Caleb looked at the sensors. The fleets were standing down. Ships were turning around. Yeah, Caleb smiled, tears in his eyes. Yeah, Princess, you did it. 3 weeks later. The trial was the most watched event in galactic history. Silas and Krog were sentenced to life in a penal colony on a frozen asteroid. The Century Treaty was signed, this time for real. But for Caleb and Vespera, the ending wasn't a parade. They stood before a joint tribunal. A human admiral and a Xylosian high priestess looked down at them. You saved us from war, the admiral admitted. But you also stole a ship, accessed classified data, assaulted a superior officer, and violated 47 protocols. And, the priestess added, looking sternly at Vespera, you have been dead to the Empire. Tradition dictates that a ruler who dies cannot reclaim the throne. Your younger brother has been crowned. Vespera stood tall. She wore simple civilian clothes now, not armor. I do not want the throne. I saw what power does to people. I choose a different path. The admiral sighed. We can't imprison you. You're heroes. But we can't let you back into service. You're too unpredictable. The verdict, the admiral banged his gavel, is exile. You are free to go, but you are banned from coalition and imperial military space. You're on your own. It was a punishment to some. But as Caleb and Vespera walked out of the courtroom, they didn't look punished. The final scene finds them on the bridge of the Rogue Echo, now patched up and repainted. They are drifting through deep space, charting a course for the Outer Rim, the unmapped sector where no flags flew. Caleb was under the dashboard, tinkering with a wire. Vespera sat in the pilot's seat, her feet up on the console. You know, Caleb said, sliding out and wiping grease from his cheek. We have no money, no backup, and half the galaxy thinks we're crazy. Vespera looked at him. The golden fire in her eyes was warm now, mischievous. She stood up and walked over to him. We have a ship, she said. And we have the truth. She leaned against the doorframe, mimicking the pose she had struck that first night in his quarters. Besides, she smirked, a playful callback to their disastrous meeting. I was just checking the environmental seals on my new flight suit. And I realized. Caleb raised an eyebrow. Yeah. She leaned in close, whispering in his ear. I have nothing on beneath this plating. Caleb laughed, a genuine, happy sound. I fixed the lock on the door this time, Vespera. No one's coming in. Good, she smiled, pulling him by his collar. Let's see what else needs fixing. The Rogue Echo fired its thrusters, turning into a streak of light against the stars, heading into a future that wasn't written by treaties or kings, but by them. And that is the story of the janitor and the princess who saved the galaxy by breaking every single rule. What did you think of that ending? Did they deserve exile or should they have been crowned leaders? Let me know in the comments down below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this ride, please destroy that like button, share this video with a friend who needs a good story, and subscribe to the channel. We have a whole playlist of humans being absolute legends in space, right here on the screen, so click that next. If you have an idea for a story, maybe a space marine who opens a bakery or an AI that falls in love with a toaster, drop it in the comments. We might just make it. Until next time, keep watching the stars. You never know what might crash through your ceiling. Stay safe, everyone.